This is the final lecture for Unit 4, the skeletal system, and this particular lecture is going to cover joints of the skeletal system. Now, let me be first to tell you that this in itself could be a semester worth of material. We are literally just going to be covering vocabulary and for the most part. So what I'm going to be doing is introducing you to some new words, telling you a little bit about some different types of joints in the body, but we are not going in depth at all. So this is going to be a very short lecture, and I encourage you, if you're ever going to go into a profession or major in something where you're going to need to know this information, you definitely want to learn more. But this is just going to be kind of a very brief overview, mainly for an introductory purpose. So joints are classified, well, first off, joints are where two bones meet, or sometimes more than two bones meet, and sometimes they're given the name articulation. So we classify joints based on their structure, how they're made, and then we also classify them based on what their function would be. So some structural classifications would be fibrous joints, we have cartilaginous joints, and we have synovial joints. So for functional classifications, we look at how much movement can occur at that joint. So if it's a synarthrotic joint or shows synarthrosis, then we say that's an immovable joint, like in your skull, the sutures. Amphiarthrosis or amphiarthrotic joints, these have slight movement. And then the last one are diarthrotic joints or show diarthrosis, which means they have free movement. Now, I want to spend a few minutes talking about synovial joints just because I think it's very important we discuss them because we've got a couple of homeostatic imbalances that I want to cover. So synovial joints are joints where the bones are separated by a fluid-containing cavity. Most of the joints in your body are synovial joints, which is another reason why I wanted to discuss these. So when you look at a synovial joint, it has some very particular parts to it. The 5 things that are unique or 5 structural features of this joint would be: 1, it has articular cartilage. Number 2, it has a cavity that's sometimes called the joint cavity or synovial cavity. It has an articular capsule around the cartilage. Then it contains fluid that is known as synovial fluid, which is a friction-reducing fluid. And then lastly, there are ligaments that reinforce this joint to give it more stability. So this is a picture of a synovial joint. So you can see the two bones. And then you'll see here's the cartilage on each side of the bone. And this little capsule and membrane together, or this fibrous cap, all of this together forms what's known as the articular capsule. And inside that, you're going to see the synovial fluid. And then reinforcing it, you're going to find ligaments that hold it in place. So the synovial joints have these little flat fibrous sacs that hold that synovial membrane and contain the synovial fluid. And because of synovial joints and the way that they're designed, they can do some kind of interesting or very unique movements to those joints. They have gliding movements, and then they also have angular movements. So this would be considered a gliding movement, going back and forth with your hand. You can have angular movements like flexion that decreases the angle of the joint. Okay. Then you can have extension. Extension is going to increase the angle of the joint. We have abduction, which is moving away from the midline. Adduction, which is moving toward the midline. And then circumduction, which is where you take the distal ends of your limbs and move them in circles. metacarpals. So this would be abduction, and then this is adduction, and then this would be circumduction. And there's others, but these are the main ones that I wanted you to learn. Now, synovial joints can be designed different ways. We have, for example, plane joints, hinge, pivot, condyloid, saddle, and ball and socket joints. And here's some pictures of those joints. So this would be a pivot joint. We see this around the radius and ulna. We have condyloid joints, and that would be here in the phalanges. See plane joints. This would be like in the carpals. A hinge joint. This would be the humerus and the ulna. This is a saddle joint. We see this in the pink at the metacarpals meet the carpals. And then a ball and socket joint like this one. Now, joints allow us to move around and do some pretty great things, but joints can also be injured. And some injuries of the joints would be sprains. A sprain is basically where the ligaments around the joint are stretched or they could be torn. Sprains are extremely painful, and a severe sprain may require you to have surgery. A subluxation of a joint is basically a partial dislocation of a joint. So I wanted to show you this picture. This is a sprain of the ankle, and you can see right here they've twisted their ankle, and you can see the inflammation on those ligaments right there. That's a type 1 sprain. Type 2, you can see that they've bent that ankle over a little more, and you can see right there that the ligaments have been torn slightly. And then this one is a type 3 sprain, and you'll see that the ligaments that reinforce the joint have been completely torn, which is obviously a pretty bad injury for that individual. Sometimes our joints become inflamed. This is a picture of an elbow. This is bursitis. Bursitis is inflammation of those bursal sacs or bursa in the synovial joint. Usually it's caused by a blow to that joint, like you bumped your elbow really hard. But in some cases, it could be from overuse and friction. An individual that I go to church with, he walked his elbow on a fence post mowing the yard, and it caused his elbow to do this. Then we have tendonitis. Tendonitis is pretty common. It's just inflammation of the tendons, and it's usually caused by overuse, just meaning that you've used that particular joint too much, not rested it enough, and because of that, it's become inflamed. It can be extremely painful, usually requires you to take anti-inflammatories and kind of stop using that joint quite as much for a little while. We also can have degenerative diseases, and remember, a degenerative disease is just a disease that breaks down the body or organ over time. So arthritis is considered a degenerative disease. One example is OA, which is osteoarthritis. This is just wear and tear on joints. This is what we typically hear older people complain of when they say they have arthritis. They actually are complaining of osteoarthritis. Don't have to be an old person to get it, though. My husband has osteoarthritis and has had it since he was in his 20s. My son has a problem with osteoarthritis and takes medicine for that. So just wear and tear on your joints can lead to that. Another form of arthritis is known as rheumatoid arthritis. And what's different about this one is it really has nothing to do with your stress on your body. In this case, it is what we know as an autoimmune disorder. Your immune system with an autoimmune disorder, and we'll talk about these later on in the immune system unit, what happens is your immune system loses the ability to tell what is good and what is bad. And so what happens is your immune system attacks your body, your own tissues, even though they're good. And so it attacks the joints of the skeletal system, and in doing so causes some severe problems with mobility. So this is it for part 3 as well as for the whole unit. So at this point, I would suggest that you go through, review your notes, review any lectures that may have given you a little bit of trouble. Make sure that you've looked over all of your diagrams and that you're prepared for not only your unit 4 diagram test, but your unit 4 notes test as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, and good luck.